What are your expectations this morning? Saturday morning. Islamic State, which version? Whose responsibility? This is something that is dear to all Malaysians' heart, I believe. And the person who has been made responsible to throw this together, the man who is writing a lot of comments on Malaysia Kini, is none other than Dr. KJ John. Can you please put your hand together to welcome him on stage? Oh, sorry. We're going to have an opening address first by Mr. Yu Hong Sing, the elder of the church. Thank you.
A very good morning to Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa, Director of the Islamic Renaissance Front, distinguished members of the panel. It is our pleasure to be able to make our premises available for this seminar. We are a great believer in public education, and it is heartening to see OMSI adopting this non-partisan approach to this very important subject. Unfortunately, distinguished members of the Barisan could not come as they have prior engagements. In recent past, Malaysia has become infamous for two things. One, making unilateral and untrue proclamations, even in Parliament, and getting away with it. Number two, we are not known for being open to intellectual discourses. We are simply not mature enough to agree to disagree in a mature manner. I seem to remember that it was the Raja Muda of Perak in 2007 who said, discussing issues openly can only be good for society. It is even better if discussions can take place in a rational, informed, and constructive manner. He went on further to say, sweeping things under the carpet cannot be the answer. It will only postpone the day when we have to deal with them, when the situation may be worse. So I am personally very glad for today. I think in the multi-racial, multi-religious democracy, the values, beliefs, lifestyle, and system of administration of justice of any particular religious group must not be forced upon other groups without proper mandate from the people. So this morning we look forward to gaining clarity from our learned speaker, distinguished members of the panel, those who relentlessly are fighting for the well-being of all Malaysians and a better Malaysia. May God help us move forward, and may our Allah have mercy on our nation. Thank you.
Indeed, can we agree to disagree amicably and maintain peace for the sake of not just the country, but ourselves and our children? So the next person is, of course, Dr. KJ John. Can you please put your hands together?
Friends, Romans, and countrymen. No Romans here, yeah. I was talking about the book of Romans. Hey, Amachik. Let's give Amachik a hand. He came all the way from Penang. He got up at 4:30 in the morning and caught a flight here. He will leave immediately after the event. So that's commitment. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. To give up a Saturday morning like this is not easy, but we really want to inform and educate all of us about the issues. An elder brother of mine recently just came to me and said, oh, your topic implies something. I said, why don't we wait for the conference to be over, then we'll talk about it. I don't know what it implies, but I'm sure we'll be educated by the audience. I have written a text so that, as my wife says, I have the gift of verbal diarrhea. So I won't apply that gift. So I've written, and I promise Jasmine it will only be 10 minutes. 10 minutes. The NST headline editorial last Sunday, for those who read the NST, which is getting less and less, I think. The headline screamed collective integrity. The word integrity is very deep and personal to me, so I always take up the word and read. This was a response to Auditor General's report tabled in the Parliament. They also the NST carried a full and exclusive interview with the Auditor General of Malaysia, AG also, focused on this issue of our collective failure to stand up to the test of national integrity being audited. Every year, the Auditor General audits the account, and we hear again and again our integrity cannot stand the audit. I have always argued this as my prayer for our nation, that we are integrated with integrity. Because we can be integrated, but without integrity, and I fear that. Therefore, allow me totally to agree with the NST's hypothesis that we have a serious need for much collective integrity, both as a people and as a nation state. But we must go beyond mere public service accountability. We must demand such standards of integrity within our entire nation so that we are all accountable and responsible. Yesterday, we were trying to organize this, and we were told that we cannot put up posters for this to come here. So suddenly, YB Hana got a text from me, please give us permission. I need to find out how to get permission. And YB Hana, about 2 hours later, says, you got permission from the Director of Enforcement. You can put it up Friday night, take it out after the event. So we have complied. That is part of integrity. Because we cannot just do it willy-nilly. And the church was right in telling me that they didn't have authority. That is integrity. So we must go beyond, and this is my call for excellence as a value and a virtue that we should all crave for. We must demand for integrity in all matters, and especially related to financial and economic accountability. We must demand the same for every cent spent by any government of the day on behalf of all citizens, and especially defined by public interest. But where should such responsibility and accountability be located? Cannot such responsibility and accountability be assigned to all public commissioners, whether it is the Auditor General, or the Human Rights Commissioner, or the Public Services Commissioner, or the Anti-Corruption Commissioner? And should not all such accountability and responsibility report directly to Parliament instead of just the executive, which is the cabinet? Moreover, already the Inspector General of Police, the Attorney General, and the Armed Forces Chief, for example, do not sit in the cabinet, but are directly only responsible and accountable to their cabinet minister. But are we satisfied with their performance defined by their KPIs? What about all the other Director Generals who hold so many portfolios and legal jurisdictions of decision making? Who are they accountable to, if not our elected assembly? To me, these accountability and responsibility issues are huge. And for me, these are the biggest issues for this general election. My concerns with bribery and corruption and truth matters. Everyone loves sports. Not everyone, however, loves to be totally accountable and responsible for clearly defined external standards of performance, of equally high quality of inputs, processes, measured with outputs and outcomes. Winning is always what leadership defines winning to be. But while we all love sports, we don't want to be accountable. Recently, a world-renowned cyclist who has been to Malaysia too was found guilty by the leadership of the world body and stripped off 7 years of global titles and ordered to repay all his past winnings to the tune of $4 million US. This guilt has finally been established by the world body after quite some years of heavy-duty investigation and science-based forensic study, which was well coordinated against a choreographed system of integrated bribery with corruption, so that these riders can win at all costs. Even in such matters, truth must matter to all of us. What then are our options? I call them private equity versus public investment, and these are borrowed phrases. The New Yorker, in an editorial on the 29th of September 2012, wrote, "If the keynote of Obama's administration has been public investment, whether in infrastructure, education, or health, the keynote of Romney's candidacy has been private equity, a realm in which efficiency and profitability are the supreme values." Our nation has similar choices to swing between these options. Do we really need to allow the creation of more wealthy individual investors or public sector corporations premised upon public goods delivery, aided and abetted by government incentives? Or do we need more focus on social investments of the entrepreneurial kind to address the needs of the bottom 40%? These are issues before us. What are our alternative models to deliver these hopes and promises? Organizations today do not exist merely for profit maximization. The profit of any business type operation is the lifeblood for survival of its system and of legitimate interests. Profits are income that exceeds expenditure related to costs of operations. Therefore, profits of any legitimate organization, in brackets including NGOs, are like oxygen for breathing of humans. No human being lives merely to breathe. Neither does any company live only to make profits. Profits, like oxygen, are necessary for survival of any organization, but it's not the sole purpose of her existence. All organizations have some other more legitimate purpose, often called a raison d'etre, or the reason for existence. Therefore, it is conceivable that organizations exist not just for profit, but for larger and meaningful purposes of the creators. Most organizations, therefore, have an option, whether they exist for public good investments or private goods equity acquisition. Most not-for-profit organizations, whether it's SWARAM or OMSI or IRF, are never illegitimate, but instead have their legitimacy as an agenda as much as the private equity people in public companies. Let us therefore not be misled by much of the hype that we read. Whither then our collective integrity as a nation state? Professor Shad Faruqi titled his magnum opus on the Malaysian Constitution, Our Document of Destiny. I call it our common vision for integration with integrity. The Malaysian Federal Constitution defines all our laws and values for good behavior as a nation state of 3 collective British colonies. All nation states are always artificially crafted and are only about 60 to 70 years old as a modern ideal. We, as one nation with 3 states, are fortunate to have been birthed when we were under the final and the influence of the British Commonwealth. Our Malaysia is now in her 49th year and moving towards our 50th birthday, which is our Jubilee year. Our rulers were directly involved in historic negotiations, and therefore their role and responsibility remains to uphold certain key features and provisions that we have agreed to and wrote into the laws of our nation. Likewise, as Peninsular Malaysians, we also have an agreement with our Sabahan and Sarawakian brothers and sisters, which too needs to be honored for our future and survival. All these demands make up what Tun Dr. Mahathir called a Vision 2020, or what he called the Bangsa Malaysia Challenge in 1981. But we cannot just become one Malaysia, as argued by the PM Najib, by the push of a button. We can only become one Bangsa Malaysians, one Bangsa of Malaysians, if I may modify that, where people are fully integrated with integrity. This nation state, or one Malaysia, already exists by definition in the federal constitution. Many challenges still remain, not the least of which is our family conversation about what is and is not the Islamic State. Today's Truth Matters Forum is organized by the Islamic Renaissance Front and OMSI to help us think through what our vision for our future is and what it is not. In conclusion, allow me, before I invite Brother Cyrus Das to moderate the session, to especially thank Brother Yu Hong Seng, the pastor of this congregation, who is hosting us. And as you can see, he's got a wonderful facility, which some people call a church, I call a building. Just always remember, the church is never the building, but the people. Let me also publicly thank Brother Ahmad Farooq Musa and the IRF for agreeing to risk walking this straight but narrow path along our road of faith with OMSI. I'm also reminded that in this business of nation growing, not nation building, that's a relic of the past, nation growing, as organic reality would define it, our journey together is always also the destination we seek to achieve. Let us therefore have a good and healthy conversation, and allow me now to invite Brother Cyrus Das to begin the forum and to remind us of any other ground rules before the dialogue. Thank you and God bless.
A very good morning to all of you. Madam Chairperson, Dr. K.J. John, Reverend Yu, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to this forum. And unlike Reverend Yu and Dr. John, I don't have any particular speech to make, except to make two short points about this morning's topic and subject. And the first of it is this, that the irony of this morning's subject should not be lost on us, that after 55 years of independence, we are still talking about a fundamental issue of identity as to whether we are a secular state or Islamic state. And that is the topic on which our keynote speaker would be addressing us. The second point is this, that this subject, this eternal debate, ongoing debate, about whether we are a secular state or otherwise, detracts from some of the more important things that we should address our mind to, matters that ought to actually preoccupy us, matters relating to the pursuit of justice and fairness for all, a clean government, greater accountability, and equal opportunity. As I mentioned, these are subjects, I think, that will be taken up this morning, if not by our keynote speaker, by our commentators. The way in which we are going to organize ourselves this morning, if I may set certain ground rules over and above what Madam Chairperson has done, is this. We will be spoken to for about 20 minutes by our keynote speaker, Dr. Ahmad Farooq Musa, and after that, 5 minutes will be given to each of our commentators to comment on the subject and express their views. And since I will not have the opportunity to introduce them separately as and when their turn to speak arrives, let me take this opportunity to introduce our speakers. And the person who's actually going to monitor time is not me or Madam Chairperson, but it's going to be that young man over there who's going to stand up now and identify himself by the name of Isaac. So Isaac is going to keep a bell, and then he's going to sort of press the bell 5 minutes before time is up, and then press it again when time is up. I don't know how he's going to manage that with the 5 minutes given to the commentators. And as YB Yusuf Rawa told me, seated next to me, he says it's impossible for politicians to manage anything in 5 minutes. So we are going to see some sort of a miracle this morning. Let's see whether that is attainable or not. But what Dr. John, Reverend Yu, and Madam Chairperson have told me is this, that they want to have floor participation. They want to have greater interaction and views from the floor, because the public at the end of the day are the most important people in any establishment or setup, and indeed in the country. And so that's the way we're going to go about it. After 5 minutes given to each of the commentators, the subject will be thrown open to the floor, and 1 minute is given to participants from the floor. You could either pose a question or make a comment, but the 1 minute rule will be enforced. Isaac will press the bell, and as soon as you go beyond the 1 second, after 1 minute, he will press the bell again and keep on pressing it until you sit. Because all of us have had experience of this in the past, where you find a speaker from the floor speaking longer than the keynote speaker. and we can't have that. So that is the way we're going to go about it. If you agree with that, then let us start this morning's program and debate. Let me introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ahmad Farooq Musa, founding president of the Islamic Renaissance Front. As you know, this morning's session is being organized jointly by the OHMSI and the Islamic Renaissance Front. Dr. Ahmad is founding president of that organization. He's a senior lecturer in cardiothoracic surgery at Monash University, so he's a medical man, but very much interested in public affairs, and has participated actively through his writings in public affairs. And today is one of the foremost speakers on this very subject on which we are having the discussion. About 2 months ago, he published a very thought-provoking article under the caption of Arguing for a Secular State. And that article, I remember, was carried in the blogs first, and later it was carried in the Star. And that article is the article which is the genesis of the idea that we should have a discussion on this topic this morning, because some of the views he expressed in that article are very far-reaching, and he sought to bring about a consensus of the views on both sides of the divide. So that is Professor Ahmad, and he'll be our keynote speaker. And after that, we have a faculty of very distinguished commentators. Unfortunately, although each of them qualifies to be a keynote speaker in his or her own right, Dr. John thought it best they should each be restricted to 5 minutes, which is, as I mentioned, an almost impossible task. But let me introduce you to them. Professor Said Farid Alatas, the gentleman immediately on the third from here, is a Malaysian national, but he's a professor of sociology at the National University of Singapore, head of the Department of Malay Studies, and one of the leading commentators today in the Southeast Asian region on the sociology of interethnic relations. And what I have here is that he does a special study on the thoughts of one of the early Muslim scholars, that is Ibn Khaldun, and a forthcoming book from him is expected on that subject. Then next to him, on his immediate left, is Malik Imtiaz, my colleague at the bar, one of the founders and former president of HAKAM, Malaysia's Human Rights Association organization. Malik is one of our leading human rights lawyers and a formidable litigator. I've always preferred to have him on my side than on the other side, but that's Malik, and Malik's writings and and speeches have been well recorded around in our papers and in our blogs, and so those writings speak for themselves. Next to Malik is, that is immediately here, is Dato' Kenny Ng. Kenny Ng was called to the Malaysian Bar in October of 1987, therefore he's also a member of the bar, like I am. But Kenny is on both sides of the divide, so to speak. That is the secular world in which we practice law and the spiritual world in which we are concerned with the larger and more important things. Kenny is an elder of the Emmanuel EFC, and he and his family are very active participants of promoting the word of the Lord. Now, on the far end over there, next to Baru, who I'll introduce shortly, is Yang Berhormat Nurul Izzah Anwar, Member of Parliament for Lembah Pantai, one of the most popular politicians in the country, and a representation of youth and idealism. That youth and idealism is still there. It is possible to be in power and not be corrupted by power, and in many ways a representation of our future. Nurul holds a master's degree from the Johns Hopkins University, studying international relations. Her first degree was in electrical and electronics engineering, and you can see the big jump from one to the other. And I suppose also a big jump from being a mother and a wife and being in active politics. But she's able to manage it all, and that alone shows the ability and capacity that she possesses. Unfortunately, YB Nurul has to leave us at 10:30, and Isaac, you would bear that in mind, because if you can sort of wind up everything, it's all in your hands. Before 10:30, at least she'll be able to take on some questions before she leaves. Now next after that let me introduce Yang Berhormat Baru Bien, member of the bar, my colleague. And Baru is an outstanding advocate and a very determined and inspiring leader who has fought for the rights of the natives in Sarawak. He does almost all the leading cases on native rights, land and customary rights in Sarawak. And Baru is a member of the State Assembly from a very interior constituency, Bakalalan. I hope I pronounced that right, Baru. Bakalalan, in the interior of Sarawak. And the easiest access to it is by helicopter, but otherwise you need to get to it through, I think, at least a minimum of a day's travel by road or by boat. And Baru represents that constituency, and Baru is a man who is, or rather a politician, who is on the rise and on the march. Now, next to YB Nurul is YB Dr. Mujahid Yusuf Rawa, Member of Parliament for Parit Bunta, long-standing member of the PAS political party. His family has been for years leaders holding positions of leadership in PAS. Dr. Yusuf Rawa holds a PhD in political science and an outstanding political speaker. And the person who came in late and just next to me is Dr. Wong Chin Huat. But don't hold it against him that he was late, because he came down from Penang, and on his way in last night he met with a road mishap. But fortunately, by God's grace, it was nothing serious, and he was not in any way injured. And he had to have a little longer sleep this morning. But here you are. He's here with us. Chinwat is a political scientist, a university lecturer, a political activist, and holds a PhD